They were never recorded in the history books, never taught, never remembered. But they happened. Somewhere between fact and fear, between the past and the impossible, they left behind only fragments and whispers. It was never supposed to be found. Whispers that never were. My world was one of cold, hard facts. Divorce cases, stolen jewels, missing persons. So when Miss Clara Morton walked into my office in the autumn of 1882, speaking of spirits and unnatural death, my first instinct was to show her the door. Her father, William Morton, was the most famous spirit photographer in London, a man who grew rich by selling solace to the grieving in the form of ghostly portraits. The police had found him in his darkroom, locked from the inside. They called it suicide. Clara called it impossible. She laid one of her father's photographs on my desk. It was his typical work, a wealthy client and a hazy, unconvincing spirit floating beside him. "My father was a fraud, Mr. Thorne," she said, "a brilliant one, but he was not a fool, and he was not suicidal. He was terrified of something. Against my better judgment, I took the case." I began where it ended, the dark room. The police had been thorough, but they were looking for a man's fingerprints. I was looking for a ghost's. The room was a magician's workshop, full of tricks for duping the eye. But as I examined the chemical trace, I found one that was different. The developing solution within it was strangely cold, and it smelled not of chemicals but faintly of ozone and of fear. Clara provided her father's client ledgers. They read like a who's who of London's grieving elite. Morton was no common charlatan. He was an artist of illusion, selling bespoke comfort to those with money to burn on their sorrow. Each entry was meticulously detailed, a testament to a fraudulent but profitable enterprise. The final client was a Lord Ashworth, a man who had recently lost his only son. I paid him a visit at his palatial home. He was arrogant, dismissive, yet beneath the surface a desperate man clinging to the one photograph Morton had produced for him, proof, he believed, that his son's spirit lingered. But Clara had told me her father took 2 photographs during that final session, a standard practice in case one plate failed. The second photograph was never delivered to Lord Ashworth. I found the glass negative still in a drying rack in the darkroom. It was not a duplicate. The hazy, comforting spirit from the first photo was gone. In its place was something else. Something dark, sharp, and utterly real. There had to be a rational explanation. A trick of the light, a chemical reaction, a new method of fraud I hadn't yet deduced. I returned to the darkroom that night, determined to replicate the anomaly. I would expose the magician's final trick and close the case. I set up the camera exactly as Morton would have, pointing it at the empty client chair. Using a simple timer, I uncapped the lens, set off a small flash powder charge to simulate the photographic conditions, and then capped it again. Everything was by the book. Everything was controlled. There was nothing in that room but me, the camera, and the dust. I submerged the plate in the developer, waiting for the blank image of the chair to emerge. But as the image resolved in the crimson gloom, my blood ran cold. The chair was not empty. Something was sitting in it. Something that hadn't been there. It was dark, sharp, and it was looking directly at me. Suddenly, I understood. William Morton's genius was not in faking ghosts. He faked them to hide the fact that he had accidentally captured a real one. The cheesecloth spirits, the double exposures, they were a desperate camouflage. He was trying to replicate the anomaly, to understand the dark thing that had attached itself to Lord Ashworth, and in his final experiment it turned its attention upon him. It wasn't suicide. It was a confrontation. The entity, drawn from whatever void it calls home by the flash of the camera, manifested in that dark room. Morton didn't take his own life. He was silenced. His last exposure wasn't on a glass plate. It was the exposure of his very soul to something that should have remained unseen. I presented my findings to Clara Morton. I gave her the peace of knowing her father was no suicide, but I burdened her with a truth far heavier. Her father was not a simple fraud. He was a sentinel who stood watch over a terrible discovery, and in the end, the darkness he watched stared back. I left the genuine photograph with her. Some secrets are too dangerous to be filed away.